Welcome back to Stalls or Circle, where we pull back the velvet curtain on the history of classic cinema. It was an era defined by grand picture palaces, legendary stars, and a distinctly glamorous nostalgia. But beneath that glittering surface was a deliberate fabrication, a stylized vision of the East built entirely on illusion. For over half a century, Western audiences consumed stories of Asian culture, yet they were watching narratives constructed without a single genuine Asian performer on screen. This was a phantom, a cultural invention built through caricature and the heavy use of yellowface makeup. This is the story of the Oriental that never was. Tonight, we look at the specific industry mechanisms that prioritized Western caricatures over actual identity, and how the studio system chose to construct a myth rather than cast a person. In the early decades of the 20th century, Hollywood discovered that xenophobia was highly profitable. They capitalized on a media-driven panic known as the Yellow Peril, turning racial anxiety into reliable box office returns. The ultimate embodiment of this fear was Dr. Fu Manchu. Created as a criminal mastermind, he was designed to be a sinister specter of Eastern malice. Yet when bringing this villain to life, studios refused to cast an Asian actor. They relied on heavy theatrical makeup, taped eyelids, and exaggerated facial hair. By placing major, established stars in the role, the industry legitimized these offensive portrayals. The prestige of the actors transformed a pulp fiction antagonist into an accepted cultural boogeyman. Keeping white actors in these robes guaranteed that the perceived threat of the East remained a thoroughly Western product, entirely controlled and monetized by the studios. Years later, the studio system attempted to course correct. They introduced Charlie Chan, a brilliant, hyper-polite Honolulu detective, positioned as a positive alternative. The hero they designed, however, was defined by passive compliance, broken English, and fortune cookie aphorisms. He was a caricature engineered specifically to comfort white audiences. Even these so-called heroic roles remained closed to Asian performers. Over dozens of films, the character was played exclusively by white men in prosthetics, most notably the Swedish performer Warner Öland. The franchise was so lucrative that when one actor passed away, the studios simply applied the same makeup to another, with American actor Sidney Toler stepping in to sustain the exact same fabricated identity. While performers won acclaim in yellowface, the era's actual Asian stars faced a very different reality. Consider Anna May Wong, a genuinely brilliant and charismatic screen icon. Despite her popularity, she was routinely and deliberately passed over for leading Asian roles, watching those parts go to white actresses in stage paint. Or take Key Luke. He found fame playing Charlie Chan's enthusiastic sidekick, but the system kept him strictly in the passenger seat. He was never allowed to inherit the lead role from the white man pretending to be his father. Hollywood studios maintained an enthusiastic interest in Asian stories, provided those stories were told through a Western filter. By the 1970s, the cultural power of the silver screen was shared with the television set, and the industry's exclusionary casting habits survived intact. Warner Brothers began developing a concept about a Shaolin monk traveling through the American Old West. A young martial arts phenomenon named Bruce Lee was heavily involved in the project's development. He was the obvious choice to play the monk, yet executives rejected him. They deemed a genuine Asian lead too risky for primetime audiences, citing concerns that viewers would not accept his authentic accent. The role of Kwai Chong Caine was handed to David Carradine, a white actor who relied on subtle prosthetics and a quiet, detached cadence to simulate an Asian identity. Kung Fu became a massive hit, but it stood as yet another instance of an Asian story missing its actual cultural anchor. For over half a century, the media meticulously constructed a mythic, deeply filtered version of the East. It was an illusion built of tape and stereotype, carefully curated to be palatable to white audiences, but artificial in its execution. While the studio systems celebrated its paint and powder creations, it successfully rendered generations of real, pioneering artists invisible on the very screens they helped inspire. The history of classic cinema is filled with beauty and nostalgia, but an honest look back means seeing the artifice for what it was, and recognizing the talents who were purposefully sidelined. This was brought to you by Stalls or Circle. Thank you for listening.